Welcome, everybody, to the PFF College Football Podcast live. Well, not live, recorded on a Tuesday afternoon in sunny Montreal, Quebec. Alongside, I'm PFF Seth, alongside my co-host Diante Lee. Diante, what's going on?
I'm good, man. You know, I'm glad it's sunny for you like it is for me. It's starting to get hot as hell out here.
Do you guys have, is the weather in San Diego like constant throughout the year? Like in terms of, is there a lot of variation, I guess, like month to month?
Month to month, not really. So like actually really our worst months weather-wise, like from a consistent basis, is actually May and June, which is usually when it gets good for everybody else. But we get like heavy marine layer at that point in time in the year. So like it'll be really foggy, really gray. So like we call it May gray and June gloom out here. And then usually when that breaks, it gets, I know, it's so corny, so corny. And then like really when it breaks like in July and August, that's when it starts getting hot as hell. But for the most part, I mean, I say it's hot. Hot means it's 84 degrees instead of 76 like it usually is. So it's all relative.
I got to do the conversion to Celsius in my head there. All right. We just recorded a great interview with Vanderbilt's new general manager, Barton Simmons, talking all things recruiting, talking about their approach, the new staff's approach to Vanderbilt football, trying to build that thing back up. We've seen Vanderbilt have good years, and obviously under Tony Franklin, it was pretty good. Not as great under Derek Mason, and obviously the new staff there with Clark Lea and Barton Simmons, they're trying to revive it to a certain degree. And we'll get you to that interview in a second. But first, there's something we were just talking about off the air, and want to get it on, want to get it recorded. We've been talking about formation into the boundary. So what does formation into the boundary mean? It means when the offense puts more players into the short side of the field, like a trips formation. Normally, you're going to see it spread out to the wide side of the field. But formation into the boundary means they're going to put this trips formation. It doesn't have to be a trips formation, but they're going to put their formation, quote unquote, into the short side of the field. And this is something that I think is growing in college football year over year. It just keeps getting, more teams are doing this. More teams are finding different ideas to do once you put that formation into the boundary in terms of play concepts. So I was curious, from your perspective as a defensive coach, what does that do to you? What does that do to a defense when the offense puts their players tightly packed like sardines into the boundary?
I mean, it warps the field. So offenses do it to manufacture space. Whether they're manufacturing space to get an isolated throw to the receiver, the single receiver out to the field, or they're trying to manufacture space for like vertical routes, benders, overs, so that way the quarterback, instead of having to be, this extremely accurate guy throwing it on a dot, right outside the seam, now he can kind of throw to air a little bit. So from a defensive perspective, it starts to shrink your playbook. It does the same on the offensive end. Don't get me wrong. I know a lot of offensive coaches will tell you that they can run their entire offense into the boundary. It's not true. There are certain things spatially that just don't work.
You're here first, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, you can try to run some of that stuff if you want. There's just a certain level of there's a certain constraint spatially that happens, at least in the passing game. But yeah, it really shrinks your playbook from a defensive perspective. So if you're a cover 3 team, and whether you're playing nickel or you're playing base, especially if you are playing base, it changes the way you can rotate, right? You can't rotate strong anymore if you're a cover 3 team because you're rotating to nothing, basically. And you'll be pushing all of your big guys, all of your non-cover guys out into the boundary in order to make your numbers equal again. So that's an issue. If you're a cover 4 team, whatever, snazzy quarters check that you might have to 3-by-1, it doesn't necessarily work the same when it's the will that's the overhang instead of your outside leverage nickel player or your Sam that's been trained to be able to handle a number 2 receiver out to the field. So, you do have to change some things in order to match it up if you still want to run all of your defense. You and I have talked about this. I talked about this with Bud Elliott, actually, on his podcast going into the national championship game, about how some of the best defensive coordinators in football have had to change their defensive approach because of this. If you're a field and boundary defense, like, for example, I'm a big Clemson supporter. I'm a big Venables fan. That got him burnt, against Ohio State because his defense is best designed to handle offenses that play to the wide side of the field. When you start putting things into the boundary, the way his defense works, there's only so many options that he has, with his typical setup to be able to defend that type of stuff. So when offenses do that, to throw those big posts coming back to the field, there are only so many options that he has to defend that. It's hard to do. The best option for you then is to get into like a dime package if you're really worried about covering down. And now that opens up issues in terms of stopping the run. So it just constrains your playbook the same way in the NFL that Sean McVay's condensed formations started to change the way the defenses had to approach things. Kyle Shanahan playing, a robust passing offense out of 12 and 21 personnel, all those kind of West Coast offense, outside zone guys, that changes what you can do. So, it does put different constraints on the defense from like a coverage perspective.
Would you say that this is a strategy that we will see continue to be employed more and more from an offensive perspective?
I think if you're an offense and you're dealing with the team that A is field and boundary based or B likes to pressure a lot. So again, going back to Clemson, he does both. He's a field and boundary defense and he wants to blitz the hell out of you. When you're dealing with defenses like that, it's a great changeup because now if you have all your bodies to the boundary, you can run screens, you can run different kind of quick game stuff. Your RPOs are different. When you want to throw the ball down the field, you don't have to worry about some crazy rotation that you couldn't see coming. Where weak safety is now rolling over to the strong half and they're super rotating the defense and things like that. It doesn't work the same kind of way. So I do think that you'll see more offenses, and we have seen more of these spread offenses embrace this. I think that we'll probably see it continue to expand, especially like for these offenses that don't have talent advantages over the defenses that they're playing. It's all about being able to manufacture explosive plays, and that's definitely a great way to do it.
Yeah, I think, thinking about not being, having the talent disadvantage, like you said, for offenses, I think that's something that I've been thinking about for a while. Is just we might see more. Tempo we've seen for 20 years now, but tempo used to be we're running the same formation. Now I feel like we're getting into a space where it's tempo to give you a look that you hadn't seen before. Whether that's a formation into the boundary, whether that's an unbalanced formation, maybe we can talk about that next week. Just because you got to get lined up so quickly as a defense, and if you're not a field boundary team and you're traveling with the nickel, all of a sudden that's a whole nother thing you got to deal with. Well, where's the strength of the formation now? If we're unbalanced, if we're formation into the boundary and all that stuff. So yeah, I think it's something that we're going to keep seeing. I also, just to clarify for people listening, when we say formation, a defense that is field and boundary, I guess what we mean is usually it's the Sam linebacker or the nickel, who is always, like, if you're a field and boundary team, he is always going to be aligned to the wide side of the field. So he'll just stand there waiting for the offensive formation to present itself and hearing his defensive call. And then if it is formation into the boundary, if there's no kind of slot receiver over him, he's still there. He's not going to travel over to the weak side and they're going to try and, in a sense, mirror the formation. So he'll stay there. So that's when we say field and boundary, that's kind of what we mean. All right, let's get to this interview with Barton Simmons. Thanks for listening to us ramble on about formation into the boundary. All right, we are now joined by Barton Simmons, General Manager of Vanderbilt football. Barton, welcome to the PFF College Football Podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. Big fan. Enjoy your work. So happy to talk ball.
Let's get started with your kind of history to where you are right now, which is sitting right behind Vanderbilt Stadium, as I can see in through the window. You're from Nashville originally, and I believe you played linebacker at the high school level, and then were able to play linebacker at Yale. So how did that come about? A, your recruiting process, I'm curious about how you get to Vanderbilt, and B, what type of linebacker were you? What position did you play? Mike Samuel, that type of thing.
Well, I was, I I maybe ended up as like a glorified linebacker, but I was actually a safety. So I played wide receiver and safety in high school. And then I went to Yale and played safety up there. And actually Vanderbilt offered me a gray shirt, and they were kind of borderline recruiting me at wide receiver. And that told me all I needed to know about the future of Vanderbilt football, because I was not good enough to play wide receiver in the SEC. And I knew that full well. But no, I went up to Yale. It was like I had like Yale, Furman, Duke, and Vanderbilt were like the 4 schools I was choosing from. And I took officials to all of them but Furman. And Duke was I just didn't like my official, didn't enjoy it. Vanderbilt was like super close to home, like 5 minutes away. And it was a gray shirt offer. And I felt like it was just like a pity offer or something. And Yale was like, if I was going to go 1AA, then, I had to get that Ivy League degree, cause I wouldn't get an Ivy League degree if I didn't have football attached to it. So I went up there and, had a fun career up there. It was a good place to play ball. We had a really good group of guys on our team, and and I played all 4 years and had an injury 1 year. And so was there for 5 seasons, and unfortunately lost to Harvard 4 times. But other than that, it was a good time.
I was going to ask, so I saw that you had logged over 200 career tackles. So play style wise, you a thumper type as a safety?
I was, yeah. I mean, like I said, I honestly, so I was, as my career progressed, like my back pedal got like less and less integrated into my playing style. It was just more like they would just set me in the hole. Mm-hmm. And then, by my senior year, like we actually had when our bus drives to trip to games, like I was always one of the guys that would pick the movies. And every time I was picking the movie, I would always pick, y'all remember the movie Willow? You ever seen the movie Willow? Mm-hmm. Willow was like my movie with like the dwarfs that would like battle. And so by my senior year, they had designed a defense and they called it Willow because I loved the movie so much, where I was literally like, it was a dime package and they just sit me in the middle of like a linebacker depth. And I just sort of had free reign to just do what I wanted. And so it was again, like I said, the more and more we got into it, the more I just turned into a kind of a glorified linebacker.
I mean, look, you're not the only person in the world who's moved kind of in closer to the line of scrimmage, especially like you said, as their back pedal kind of dries up a bit. I've been to, like I don't live in college football world here, but I've been to not many college football games, but one of those games has been a Yale Harvard game. And
really? There you go.
Yeah, I want to say like 2011, 2012. I should have looked this up beforehand, but it was a game that went down to the wire. And one of the teams, I wish I remember who, one of the teams did a fake punt on like 4th and 20 from their own.
I was at that game too.
Yeah.
I was there. It was the most ridiculous call in the history of calls. Yale was winning. And they were a big underdog. And it was like 4th and 21 at their own like 25-yard line. And they called a fake punt. And it didn't. And they were close to getting like 12 yards or something. And
they didn't convert.
They did not convert. And then Harvard drove down and won. So
that's a special teams coordinator trying to get a raise or a new job.
Something. Yeah. That one will haunt Yale forever, I think.
One of the things that I tell people when I ask about going to see that game in particular was the thing I thought that was really cool. Maybe I'm over exaggerating a bit, but felt like the only time I will ever get close to going in a time machine.
Yeah.
Like they try and make it, it's just like Yale Harvard. That's it. Like that. It's just the game. And you're in that big oval. Like I went to the game at Yale and, you're in that big oval stadium that is probably hasn't been renovated in I don't know how long. And it's just a really cool setting. That's obviously different than going to probably most major college football games.
No, yeah, it is cool. And there's, you got like generations of people that are out there with their, kids and grandkids, and some of them wearing fur coats and drinking champagne or whatever. Like, it's just like, and then you got like the college kids who just, they may be nerdy, but they'll party for that game, man. And they're out there getting after it. And so it's a scene now. And then the funny thing too, for that game also is like, a lot of times it's like the only game that the kids will go to. And so they don't really know football that well, but they have like the school spirit. And so like, I remember in one of our years in the game, our team was down there on the sideline or on the goal line, and our quarterback was using his hands to try to quiet the crowd. And the crowds, the home crowd, like the students didn't know he was trying to quiet them. He thought he was trying to like get them up and get them louder. And so they got louder, and like it didn't really work. And so, but that's just sort of that's the nature of it there with the Ivy League fandom.
That's a good deal. So I did want to kind of touch on your role and kind of your pathway leading up to this. So you've been an analyst at Rivals. You were up front, as an analyst at 24/7. I actually had filled in for you right around the time that you had announced that you were heading over to Vandy when I did Bud's podcast.
Oh, that's right.
National Championship. So we got to speak a little bit, off air about kind of like your process preparing for this role. So what have you taken from your job at Rivals and 24/7 that really prepped you for the GM position that you have now?
I think, the thing that it's really honestly like the irony of this deal is, so, I've got a really good relationship with our head coach. I've known him since I was, we kind of grew up together. And I think ironically, like I don't know that I would necessarily have been confident to be prepared for this in the way that I am. Maybe as recently as like, I don't know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. Because I've got sort of the background in recruiting, and I've got the relationships and all that sort of there. And I've got experience, certainly in evaluating players. And, but I think really over the last 5 years, and I say that's kind of an arbitrary number, but in my recent relative like professional history, like I've started to really like turn the corner on not just sort of like covering recruiting, and try to like kind of crack it a little bit more. And that's, and one of the ways that's, sort of allowed me to work through that is I'm doing a lot more college football coverage as well. And so like it's to me, it's not really about just like the recruiting process anymore. It hadn't become that. It'd become more about like, all right, where do these guys come from? Like what works, what doesn't work, like studying a lot more, why things went right, why things went wrong. And, and then honestly, like it's the perfect storm for me to be here as well, because I've always had an up close look at Vanderbilt, and from when I was a kid to, I covered Vanderbilt when James Franklin was here. And like, I've studied it closely. So I guess all that to say is I've just sort of ridden the wave of the recruiting industry. But more recently, I've sort of started to turn the corner and be a lot more analytical in the way I look at things. I think that's helped me kind of step into this role with a game plan, as opposed to just trying to replicate, everything that everybody else does.
So I'm curious about that game plan, because I was thinking about myself. I'm always thinking about myself, but in the way that, so like, let's say someone tells me tomorrow you're going to go coach a D1 football team, and it's like I have my offense ready. It exists right here. It exists, okay, in the brain. But then if I went to a school and they were like, okay, but actually you can't run that offense because you don't have the athletes for it or whatever. You got to run the wishbone. I don't know. You got to run the wing tee or what, something I don't know. So I'm curious if that's the same thing, because then you go from, the national, covering it at a national level, and now you're at Vanderbilt, you certainly can't get the same athletes that even some people in your own division can get. So how does that kind of game plan change when you're going from the national level to now specifically Vanderbilt?
Well, I think, one of the things that I've always loved most about the job, because look, the reality is, as much as my job at 24/7 had a significant scouting element to it, I wasn't really just a scout isn't really what that job is. It's all the other things. And then scouting is sort of weaved in there. But the scouting part of it is really the thing that I enjoyed the most, probably. And so so in taking that interest, Vanderbilt in a lot of ways really does fit to sort of play to some of the things I've been cultivating and the way I've looked at things. Because look, I think it's particularly early on, if Vanderbilt is gonna get a 5-star kid, why is that guy going to Vanderbilt, where we've struggled over the last few years and we were 0-9 last year, as opposed to all the blue bloods? And so I think identifying that and understanding, we need to understand what our fit is. We need to understand what our niche is. We need to understand, what we can win with, and really be disciplined within that, and hold ourselves accountable to that. And really lean into and embrace the idea that there's an academic institution with high academic standards, and this is going to attract high achieving people. And we want high achieving people that are excited about that opportunity on and off the field. All those things, I think, provide us a niche to really be successful here. And I say that as it relates to your question, in that I think that this is a job where smart, strategic, a smart strategic approach to the personnel building, the talent acquisition is the only way to get it done here. You can't just sort of bang your head against the wall and just recruit. You have to, I think, have a really strong game plan and really strong principles as to how you're going to build this. And look, you can't build it here at Vanderbilt without NFL players. That is a non-negotiable. We have to have NFL players on this roster. So we have to be smart enough to understand how you get NFL players on this roster, and really zero in on what the traits are that are gonna that we can pinpoint and pluck out and value in ways that maybe some others don't. And then count on our staff to develop, because that's truthfully, that is what is going to allow this to work here. Is I sat here, I was one of the first people in this building that Clark Lea hired. And I sat in here and I watched a conveyor belt of coaches come in here and get interviewed. I mean, it was an exhaustive interview process for every position. And that was intentional. We have got to have the best coaching staff in college football. We have to have the best developmental program in college football. And so if we have that, and I think we do, I'm incredibly confident and excited about the people in this building. But if we can't have that, it allows me and us to just go find the raw materials that they will get, and then expect them to get on this campus and get developed every day and get better every day. And then we got a chance. And then, down the road, as this thing continues to build, maybe we do go and get the 5-star number 1 player in the country. But we have to understand who we are and what our strengths are, and who our fit is. And in doing that, I think that the things that I've been sort of studying and working through kind of fit this job, because there's a lot of jobs that I could go to where it's that's really not the expectation. The expectation is you better sign a number 1 class in the country, or else and that's not how we're going to do it. And I think that that's exciting, because I feel confident in the strategy and plan we've got in place.
So that actually kind of leads me to what I was really interested in asking. So I'm a West Coast guy and a USC fan. So watching what happened with Stanford over like the back half of the 2000s obviously broke my heart a bit, because there was a lot of pain in that as a fan. But one of the things that I always found very honorable and admirable about that program is that it was clear that Harbaugh was able to step in and say a lot of the same things that you are kind of articulating now, whereas the style of play has to match the exact same kind of kid we're recruiting. The kind of kid we're recruiting has to match the exact same kind of kid that gets admitted here that's not a football player. So in terms of alignment, when you're sitting down with Clark Lea and you guys are talking about this, not only from a year-to-year standpoint, but, over the stretch of a cycle, over the stretch of your guys' contracts, what is that conversation like as far as making sure that there is an alignment from you as a personnel guy, him as a head coach, the position coaches, just everybody in the field house? What are those conversations like in terms of talent acquisition and development?
Yeah. Yeah. I think alignment here is really important. I think that's sort of one of my roles, because like one thing we have talked about here is protecting the 10-year vision of this roster. And the idea that building this thing is going to be about like creating a foundation, building it right, building it slowly. And when I say slowly, like it's important, like we're absolutely not like excusing and sort of deferring any early success. We want to be successful right now. We want to win this year. Like there's no question about any of that. But we're not going to compromise the long-term vision for short-term fleeting gains. And so within that, it's important that the coaching staff is aligned, the head coach is aligned, the personnel is aligned. It all matches up and fits together. And in a way, I think that's partly my role is to marry those things together and really kind of make sure, like hold the staff, ourselves accountable to what those long-term visions are. Like make sure that our roster reflects on a year-to-year basis, on a position-by-position basis, the way we've sort of mapped this thing out from the outset. And so that's all, I think, very much in play. And I think that's critical. And I think one thing that is, you sort of, there's a reality in college coaching that coaches just, the nature of the business is they are often gone within 3 years. They recruit a group of position players that they never fully see through as graduates. And so there is just a inherent motivation to hey, look, I'm going to sign as many guys as I can. I'm going to look good in the recruiting rankings, and I'm going to be off to a better gig. And I don't expect none of our coaches are approaching it like that here in this building. It's a low ego building, and that's been awesome. But the reality is just there. It's just like and so one of the things that we've got to do is just, again, make sure that there are no sacrifices in the short term for anything other than making sure Vanderbilt is built to be a successful program over an extended long-term vision. And I think all that, to your point, like just matches together. And in a way that a lot of people, I think, don't have the patience to do. Like it's real easy to jump in and just be like, you know what, I want to get some commits and get some headlines and win quick, and we'll get the next job. Like, I'm from here. Clark is from here. He went to school here. We got 4 guys on this staff that played here. Everyone is really invested in this place to be successful beyond this year. And so it's important that you build that right from that sense.
So following up off of that, you kind of touched on, the fact that this is a hometown deal for you and for Clark. So that that makes me interested in what your guys' conversations are as far as a recruiting imprint, for you guys, especially because the academic standard is the academic standard at Vanderbilt, it might not be just within your 500-mile radius, right? So when you guys are having conversations about where you're looking to identify talent and bring talent in from, what is that like in terms of your borders as recruiting goes?
Sure. Well, I think as with anything we do here, it's important for us to learn from the past and study it and let that inform some of our future decisions. And so, Diante, you're from California. Seth, you're Canada guy, like
far northeast.
So I don't know how much you guys have like really paid attention to Vanderbilt football, but if you rattle off like the Ring of Honor or whatever you want to call it for the Vanderbilt greats, it's Jordan Matthews, it's Earl Bennett, it's Zach Cunningham, it's a lot of guys, Hunter Hillenmeyer, it's guys that are from Tennessee and it's guys that are from Alabama. Like those are two areas that has been proven to be like regularly successful here. Georgia, there's been a lot of really good players there as well. And the point being is that there have been a couple isolated, success stories from areas outside of sort of the footprint of Vanderbilt, and we're going to continue to, when there's a fit, we're going to lean into it and look for it and embrace it, but we're not going to devote resources to like recruiting California. We're not going to have an area guy for, the Pacific Northwest. Like we're going to recruit our footprint. And we're going to have, and we're going to recruit Tennessee hard, and we're going to recruit Alabama hard, and we're going to recruit Georgia hard. And we're going to, and look, Nashville is in an incredible location, for football talent. Like on the planet, there's not a more, populated, talent-rich area than the southeastern part of the United States. So why would we like then spend a bunch of time flying all over the country? We'll do that as necessary. Like we're not going to shy away from that, but we're going to, as it relates to just sort of allotment of resources, like we want this area where we're sitting in the midst of, to be a hotbed for us mining out really, talented football players.
Yeah, I was actually curious about, Nashville and Tennessee as a whole, because, we've seen, the Volunteers kind of not be that program that we all thought they were going to be forever in the as of the early 2000s, late 90s, whatever it is. But then I'm like, wait a minute, I feel like, recruiting plays a big part into a program's success. And I'm like, Tennessee, Nashville, they're producing a ton of players. So I'm just curious, like what is Nashville? How has it changed over, Nashville and then I guess Tennessee as a whole? Like how has the recruiting grounds there changed over the last, whatever it is, 30, 20, 10 years, since you've been around it for so long?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just remember back when I was playing. So I was, my senior year, I was on like the Elite 11 or whatever they called it, like the mid-state, top players, all divisions. And because I moved recently and I kind of stumbled onto like the newspaper clipping, and it was me. It was another teammate of mine that went to Yale with me. It was our quarterback, Ingle Martin, who ended up going to Florida. And it was like, it was a guy that went to Memphis. It was a guy that went to Tulsa. It was a couple guys that maybe went 1AA. Like it was a very, underwhelming list of like colleges. And that's just like, that's a thing of the past. In Nashville now, it is SEC, FBS, Power 5 all over the place, which is great, obviously. And that, and you can extend Nashville like Murfreesboro, Brentwood, which is just south, Williamson County. Like there's just a bunch of, there's just so, the population has blown up in this area. And to that, like it's also become a popular place to recruit. So you got a lot more coaches fishing in this pond. And, but I think, again, there's a real opportunity given our head coach's history in this town, in this city, in this state. You know, we've a bunch of coaches that we played against growing up are still coaching in major programs in this state. A bunch of players that we played against growing up are now head coaches in this state. A bunch of players we played with growing up are now head coaches in this state. And so I think that we've got an opportunity, as this state has continued to explode with population and with talent, to get the right guys. And again, it's always going to be about getting the right guys. And we're going to have to probably say no to some guys along the way that are really good players, and just trust that wherever those guys go, whatever success they may have, like, we just have to trust that the guys we are getting are the right guys. And so it's about continuing to stay disciplined with that, but also just, you know what, like, being engaged in this coaching community, being engaged in this state, and prioritizing it in a meaningful way. And I think we can get the right guys. And you know what, it's been really exciting and like energizing to have some of the conversations that we've had to this point, because I think a lot of the state, it really wants Vanderbilt to be successful.
So on that, you know, when you guys are kind of setting up your goal board, you know, everybody has their different little pyramid of success, whatever it may be, in these buildings. I know that, you know, the most successful programs are able to take things and make it their own. But when you're looking at, the rest of the college football landscape, is there any program or programs or, you know, types of approaches that you guys are thinking of modeling yourselves after? Or do you guys approach this like Vanderbilt's got to be a 1-of-1 as we build this thing out?
I honestly, the truth is, like, we really believe that this is a unique place, and we can really make it its own niche. And that's not to say that there isn't some level of, hey, I mean, like, there's academic schools are obviously programs that are facing some of the same challenges that we face, and challenge is even a word that I don't really even love to use with it. Like, we're embracing the opportunities here. And I think one of the things that's really exciting is, look, we got a brand new facility that's about to be built, $300 million investment coming from the university. We got a new chancellor, a new athletic director that's been here. Our head coach played here. These are all people that came back and have stayed and believe passionately in this place. And even with that, look, there's been some like hard times within the football program in terms of finding success. But we believe that this is a place that's like incredibly uniquely positioned. I mean, we are playing in the best conference in college football. It's the third best conference in the world after the AFC and the NFC. And it's a conference that has a bunch of schools that all really kind of look alike, except for us. We're the one outlier in this conference. And so I think that we believe, because we're a small private school, we're one of the top academic programs in the country. So, and we're in a great city. And so, you know, this is all recruiting pitches certainly that have been used before, but we believe that because of the investment and the alignment right now in this place, you know, Coach Lea has said consistently, like, we're dreaming this totally anew. This is team one. You know, everything is there is no telling what we can accomplish here. And the truth is, like, everyone in this building, like, believes that with total conviction. And what's also exciting too is, like, not only do we have former players that are back here on the staff, but even like Lamar Morgan is our cornerbacks coach. He was at Louisiana before. And look, Billy Napier is going to get a big time job at some point. He didn't have to leave. He was a GA here before. Like, he came back and has been on the coaching side and believes in what this place is going to be able to accomplish. And so I just think we got a lot of optimism around here, and we are certainly going to, you know, take the lessons that Clark has learned at Notre Dame and understands, what places are going to have similar situations to us that we can try to continue to learn from. But I do think that this is a unique place with a unique fit and a unique niche that we can sort of dream totally from the ground up and just build this thing right.
All right. Before we get you out of here, I just had, well, first of all, I wanted to say that your head coach probably ran one of my favorite defenses last season. I thought it was like it's like a modern twist on like a classic 4-man front type of defense, I guess you would say. Just it helps when you have special players there, and he had a few. But at the same time, one of my favorite defenses to watch. I thought they were doing a lot of modern stuff there. But my question to you is, going back to your time at 247 and on the recruiting side there, what, like off the top of your head, what is the kind of like the position or positions that you think have maybe changed the most in terms of maybe body type, in terms of maybe athletic ability, that you've seen over these past 10 years or whatever it's been?
I think the obvious one is linebacker. Like it is, the linebacker position to me, I'll say this, like when you think about, all right, where is speed most important? You think about wide receiver, you think about cornerback, and speed is obviously good for those positions. But one of the things, like as I've studied through this thing, I've found that some of my misses have been guys that are, where speed is their top trait, as opposed to at the receiver position. Whereas like at linebacker, that's actually what I've found to be the position that most highly correlates to success, just pure athleticism, pure combine numbers. Like how athletic are they? Can they run sideline to sideline? Can they play in space? Do they play running back in high school? Do they, because like a linebacker in today's game has to do so much and is such this is put in all these binds. And so I think it's been, that is absolutely one. I think, another one is just, really all of them I could sort of talk about, but I also really think that when you look at just sort of the offensive line position, at least in the way that I believe in it, like that's a position where you recruit athletes and you build them up into physical players. And, you want a mindset, and that's important. But as with a lot of this stuff, like the athleticism comes first. You want the length, you want the athleticism. The 330-pound guy is not necessarily going to be the guy that is going to be the long-term success story. He may be more successful in high school, but like that's just sort of a little bit of a snip of sort of like the mindset here. Like we're going to find the raw materials position by position, and then we're going to trust this hallway of just stud coaches to pull it out of them.
Do you have, you talked about the communication between you and the head coach. Is there communication between you and the position coaches into finding the type of player that fits what they want and what the whole project is going after?
Yeah, no doubt. In fact, we're pretty active, sort of going through this stuff as a staff, and talking about players as a staff. And I think it's been incredibly helpful keeping everyone on the same page, everyone seeing what everyone else is seeing. And it's allowed us to just have total, you talk about alignment, like, we've got a handful of commits at this point with more on the way. And we got total alignment on how we view those guys, how we plan on using them and sort of what we need to supplement those guys and things of that nature. And so I really believe in that. This is absolutely not some operation where I'm just in here picking players. Like this is an operation where it's very collaborative. And that's going to be the case schematically too, I think. And that's a little more your wheelhouse, Seth, but like, I think you're going to see a program that is adaptive in terms of both offensively and defensively to what our strengths are. And that's, I think, built from a mindset that comes from our coaching staff that is extremely collaborative and, low ego, frankly. And I think it's been really fun sitting in this office, just like seeing it, some of that effort come to light has been really cool. And I think it's going to produce some really good units.
All right. Barton, General Manager of Vanderbilt football. Thank you for joining us here on the podcast.
It was a pleasure. Anchor down. Y'all come out to a game sometime.
We'll Absolutely. Be there. Whenever the border opens, I'll be there. Take a tour of America.
Yeah, I'll definitely be in touch.
All right. Well, there you have it, boys and girls. Our interview with Vanderbilt's Barton Simmons. We know each other on Twitter for a while. We communicated a little bit through that medium. Never talked to him before, and this is really he just seems like a guy that knows what he's doing there, trying to fix Vanderbilt football. So good luck to them, and we will see you next week.